He sat on the cold bench outside the grocery store, barefoot. His feet were red, cracked, and dust-covered. People walked past him, barely glancing. Some noticed the missing shoes, others caught sight of the worn-out backpack beside him, but no one paused. No one saw the pain in his eyes. No one knew what he had just done. But someone would, someone very special. His daughter. There was a time when Matthew Clark wore polished leather shoes, tucked his shirt in neatly, and carried his briefcase to a job that made him feel important. He was a mid-level financial analyst in a small but thriving firm. Life was not glamorous, but it was stable. He had a loving wife, Anna, and a little daughter, Sophie, whose laughter was the melody of his mornings. Then came the car accident. Anna never made it past the emergency room. And Matthew never truly came out of the fog that followed. Widowed, broke from medical bills and funeral costs, and suddenly responsible for a 4-year-old daughter, Matthew's world crumbled. His firm tried to support him, but the weeks he took off turned into months. Eventually, his position was filled. When he returned, there was no job waiting. He tried. Lord, he tried. He applied everywhere, from financial institutions to delivery jobs. But the market was saturated, and every interview ended the same: "We're looking for someone a bit more current." Or worse, "You've been out of work too long." The savings dried up. The apartment was too expensive. He moved to a one-room shelter that smelled of bleach and despair. Nights were filled with coughing strangers and creaking bunk beds. But Sophie remained his light. She still giggled at silly jokes and wrapped her arms around his neck each night, whispering, "You're the best daddy in the world." Those words became both a comfort and a burden. One gray Tuesday morning, Matthew opened the pantry in the shelter's communal kitchen and found nothing. Not a slice of bread. Not a packet of instant noodles. Sophie hadn't eaten since the night before. He stared at her, skinny, pale, still smiling. She was brushing her doll's tangled hair, oblivious to the hunger in her stomach. Matthew stepped outside and sat on the bench, head in his hands. Then he looked down. His shoes. Scuffed, old, but wearable. He stood up and walked to the pawn shop 3 blocks away. The man behind the counter raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Matthew left barefoot, with $8 in his pocket and a plastic bag of crackers, bananas, and milk. Sophie ate like it was Christmas. She looked up at him, smiling with crumbs on her cheeks. "Thank you, Daddy." He didn't cry then. He waited until she slept and wept into the pillow silently. The next few weeks got worse. The shelter closed down for renovations. They ended up in an abandoned van behind a warehouse. Matthew made sure it was clean, covered the windows with cardboard, and even fixed a small battery-powered fan to keep Sophie cool. He told her it was a camping adventure. She believed him. One day, as he rummaged through a dumpster behind a diner hoping for tossed bread or unopened ketchup packets, Sophie wandered off. When he returned and saw she wasn't in the van, he panicked. He screamed her name, ran barefoot across hot concrete, begged strangers for help. He found her 2 hours later at a small bookstore. She was inside, talking to the owner, an elderly woman named Margaret. Matthew stormed in, eyes wild with fear, and scooped Sophie into his arms. "Don't ever do that again," he cried, clutching her tightly. Margaret placed a hand on his shoulder. She wasn't trying to run away. She came to sell something. Matthew turned to Sophie, confused. She pulled out her most prized possession, a plastic bracelet made of mismatched beads. I told her we needed money for food. I said maybe she could sell this for me. The bracelet had been a birthday gift from Anna, handmade with little heart beads and one with the word "Mom" engraved in it. Matthew couldn't hold back. He dropped to his knees and sobbed. Margaret knelt beside them. "Come back tomorrow. I have a job offer." Matthew began working at the bookstore, organizing inventory and helping customers. It wasn't much, but it paid in dignity and warm meals. Margaret let them sleep in the back room, where there was a couch and a tiny kitchenette. Sophie was enrolled in a nearby school. The shoes came later, gifted by a loyal customer who had heard Matthew's story. But what mattered wasn't the shoes. What mattered was what Sophie had done. She had been willing to give up her last treasure so they could survive. What she did next, though, changed their lives entirely. 6 months into his job at the bookstore, Sophie, now 6, began drawing pictures and writing little stories during her free time. Margaret noticed. She gave Sophie a notebook and crayons and told her to let the colors dance. Matthew didn't think much of it until one day Sophie handed him a full notebook. "It's called My Daddy's Feet," she said. He flipped through it. Page after page was filled with childlike drawings and a story told from a little girl's point of view, how her daddy walked barefoot so she could eat, how he was a hero, and how one day she would buy him magical shoes that could make dreams come true. Matthew cried again, this time not from pain, but from pride. Margaret had connections. She sent the story to a local publisher. 2 months later, My Daddy's Feet was printed as a children's book. It sold out within weeks. Then came TV interviews. Schools invited Sophie to read her story. Foundations reached out with offers. Donations poured in. One anonymous donor bought them a house. A beautiful, modest home with a garden and a study for Matthew. He began speaking at shelters and schools, encouraging struggling parents, giving hope where there was none. But the best moment came one evening when Sophie, dressed in a yellow dress and shiny shoes, ran to him and handed him a small box. Inside were shoes, handmade, brown leather, with tiny gold letters etched on the side, "Hero Dad." Matthew couldn't speak. He slipped them on, and Sophie said, "Now they're your magical shoes, Daddy. You don't have to walk alone anymore." And so, the story of a struggling dad and his selfless daughter became more than just a memory. It became a symbol, a testament to what love, sacrifice, and hope can achieve. Because sometimes, you don't need much to change the world. Sometimes, all it takes is a father who would walk barefoot for his daughter, and a daughter brave enough to carry him back home.